ladies and gentlemen, there is a great mystery that many seek outside, yet it has always been within. A man may wander across distant lands, searching for truth. A woman may fill her days with endless pursuits, hoping to grasp meaning, but all along, the answer lies in the stillness of their own being. Be still and know that you are. Not the stories, not the roles, but the ever-present awareness, through which all things come and go. This is the great realization, and it is already here within you, waiting to be known. From the moment we come into this world, we are given a name, an identity, and a story. We are told who we are by those around us, our parents, our teachers, our society. We learn to define ourselves through these labels. Through our successes and failures, through the roles we play, we say, I am this or I am that. And with each statement we strengthen the illusion of a self that is built entirely upon external conditions. But beneath all these layers, who are you? Who are you without the name, without the title, without the past you cling to? Most people live their lives completely identified with their thoughts and emotions. They believe that the voice in their mind, the endless stream of commentary, opinions, and judgments, is who they truly are. If the mind says, I am not good enough, they believe it. If the mind says, I need more to be happy, they chase endlessly after possessions, achievements, or approval. But the mind is like a restless ocean, always moving, always changing. One moment it lifts you up with hope, the next it pulls you down with doubt. To base your entire existence on something so unstable is to live in a constant state of suffering. Consider this. If you can observe your thoughts, then who is the one watching? If you can feel your emotions rise and fall, then who is the one aware of them? There is something deeper, something beyond the thinking mind that is untouched by its fluctuations. This presence, this silent awareness, is the true self. The world teaches us to build an identity out of external things, our career, relationships, our social status. But all these things are temporary. A man who defines himself by his wealth lives in fear of losing it. A woman who finds her worth in the praise of others becomes a prisoner to their opinions. When we attach ourselves to impermanent things, we make our peace dependent on what is ultimately beyond our control, and when life inevitably changes, we suffer. But there is another way to live. There is a freedom that comes when we recognize that we are not the roles we play, but the awareness that witnesses it all. When a storm passes through the sky itself is not affected. In the same way, your true self is not disturbed by the temporary storms of the mind. The moment you realize this, a space opens within you, a space of stillness, of clarity, of peace. This realization is not an idea to be understood intellectually, it is a truth to be directly experienced. It is written that the wise build their house upon the rock, not upon the shifting sands. To know yourself as the unchanging presence beneath the mind is to build your life upon solid ground. In that recognition, fear loses its grip. For what is there to fear when you are no longer bound by illusion? And so the question is not, who do I think I am, but who am I beyond thought? To sit in silence and turn your attention inward is to begin to touch upon the answer. When you no longer seek yourself in the external world, you start to sense the presence that has been with you all along. It is not something you must create, nor is it something that can be lost. It is the one thing that has remained unchanged through every stage of your life. To awaken to this truth is to step out of the illusion of the false self. It is to return to what has always been, the quiet, unshakable presence of being itself. When you live from this awareness, life no longer feels like a constant struggle. You no longer chase after happiness in the future, for you realize that peace is already here in the stillness of this very moment. And in that stillness, you are free. There is a stillness that exists beneath the noise of the mind, a presence that is always here, yet so often overlooked. Most people live their entire lives caught in the momentum of thought, moving from one worry to the next, from one desire to another, never stopping to recognize the deeper dimension of being that is available in every moment. The mind is like a river that never stops flowing, pulling attention from one thought to another, from past memories to future concerns. And because this movement is so constant, people rarely question it. They assume that to think endlessly is natural, that to be consumed by worries and distractions is simply the way life is. But in truth, there is something far greater, something that is always present, but only revealed when one steps beyond the chatter of the mind. To recognize this presence, one must first become aware of the space between thoughts. The mind, no matter how restless, is not an unbroken stream. There are always gaps, brief moments of stillness where no thought exists. Most people do not notice these moments because they are immediately replaced by the next thought. But if one pauses, even for a few seconds, and simply becomes aware of the present moment, they can begin to sense the vast silence that lies beneath all mental activity. This silence is not empty. It is full, alive, and deeply peaceful. It is hap and hap and hap and hap and and this presence is not something one must attain or develop. It is already here. The only reason it is not recognized is because attention is constantly pulled away by the mind. If a lake is disturbed by strong winds, its surface is filled with ripples, distorting its reflection. But when the wind settles, the water becomes clear, and its depth can be seen. In the same way, when one steps out of identification with thought, a profound stillness emerges. In the same way, when one steps out of thought, profound stillness emerges. Many people search for peace in external things, believing that once they achieve certain goals, obtain certain possessions, or fix certain problems, they will finally feel at ease. But peace is not something to be found in the future. It is something that exists only in this very moment. The mind may say, once I have more money, I will be at peace, or once I find the right person, I will be complete. But have these thoughts ever led to lasting fulfillment? The moment one desire is met, another takes its place and the cycle continues. True peace comes not from adding more to life, but from stepping out of the endless search and recognizing the stillness that is already here. To experience this directly, one can simply pause and become fully present. Listen not to the words in the mind, but to the silence beneath them. Feel not the tension of the body, but the simple aliveness of being. The more one rests in this awareness, the clearer it becomes that they are not the thoughts that come and go, but the space in which they arise. This realization is the beginning of true freedom. It is said, "Be still and know." This stillness is not inactivity. It is the essence of presence itself. It is a state in which the mind no longer dominates, and a deeper intelligence, one that is not based on thought, begins to emerge. From this place, life is no longer approached from a place of resistance or struggle, but with a quiet wisdom that flows effortlessly. When one is rooted in presence, there is no need to chase after peace, for peace is already here. The restless searching ceases, and in its place there is a deep and unshakable knowing, an awareness that has been waiting to be recognized all along. There is a place that cannot be seen with the eyes or touched with the hands, yet it is more real than anything in the world. It has been spoken of throughout the ages, called by many names, yet its essence remains unchanged. Some seek it in distant lands, others in the words of teachers and books, but it is not found in external things. It has always been within, waiting to be realized. This place is the kingdom within, the realm of true being, the unshakable presence that exists beyond time and form. Most people live as if the source of life is outside of them. They look to the world to give them meaning, to provide fulfillment, to make them whole. Yet everything in the world is fleeting, constantly changing. That which brings joy today may bring sorrow tomorrow. That which appears to complete a person today may be taken away in an instant. If one builds their sense of self upon these shifting sands, they will always feel uncertain, always searching, never resting. But there is a deeper foundation, one that does not move with the winds of life. It is the presence of the divine within, the eternal reality that remains untouched by the changing circumstances of the world. To recognize this, one must turn inward. There's a reason why silence has always been a gateway to the sacred. In silence, the distractions of the world fade away, and what remains is the pure awareness of being itself. It is in this quiet space that one begins to sense the depth of who they truly are. It is not a concept to be grasped, not an idea to be debated, but an experience to be felt directly. In this presence there is no lack, no striving, no fear, only the fullness of life itself. This is why it has been said that the kingdom of God is within. It is not a distant place to be reached one day, it is here now, always present, beneath the surface of thought and identity. The problem is not that it is far away, but that most are too distracted to notice it. The mind, with its endless stream of worries, opinions, and desires, keeps attention fixed on external things, but when one becomes still, even for a moment, for a great truth begins to reveal itself. There is something beyond the mind, something vast, silent, and radiant. It has no name, yet it is the source of all that is. To live from this place is to live in peace, not because the world is perfect, but because one is no longer dependent on the world for peace. The challenges of life may still arise, but they do not shake the foundation of being. Success and failure, praise and criticism, gain and loss, all these are seen as passing waves upon the surface, while beneath it all remains the unchanging presence of the eternal. This recognition transforms everything. No longer does one seek fulfillment in things that cannot truly satisfy. No longer does one search for love because they realize love is their very essence. No longer does one fear the future because they see that they are held by something far greater than the temporary events of the world. Life itself becomes an expression of that presence, and every moment is filled with the quiet joy of simply being. To realize the kingdom within is not to escape from life, but to see life as it truly is. It is to awaken from the dream of separation and recognize that one has never been apart from the source of all things. This is the great truth that has been spoken of through the ages, the invitation that is always present, but it cannot be found by looking outward. It is discovered only when one turns within and becomes still, and in that stillness one knows. When one realizes themselves as consciousness, life ceases to be a struggle. The burdens that once seemed overwhelming lose their weight, and the constant striving for something more begins to dissolve. No longer is there a restless search for meaning, happiness, or fulfillment in the world outside. Instead, there is a deep and unshakable knowing that everything one has ever sought is already here within. This shift is not a small change. It is the greatest transformation a person can undergo. It is the difference between living as a prisoner of the mind and living in the freedom of being. Most people move through life believing they are the roles they play, their name, their profession, their personal history, their thoughts and emotions. They say, I am this or I am that, defining themselves by things that are, by their very nature, temporary. But when one looks deeply, they begin to see that these identities are like passing clouds in the sky. They come and go, shifting with time, but the sky itself, the vast, open awareness in which everything appears, remains unchanged. You are not the passing thoughts, the fleeting emotions, or the circumstances that rise and fall. You are the awareness in which all these things appear. This realization is not an abstract philosophy. It is the key to true peace. When a person no longer identifies with the ever-changing content of the mind, they no longer suffer unnecessarily. Pain may still arise, challenges may still come, but they are no longer seen as threats. They are simply passing phenomena in the space of awareness. Just as waves rise and fall upon the ocean without disturbing the depths beneath, experiences come and go without shaking the foundation of one's being. From this place of knowing, life is no longer approached with resistance but with openness. Instead of reacting with fear, anxiety, or anger, there is a quiet acceptance of what is. This does not mean passivity or indifference. It means moving through life with wisdom and clarity, acting not from conditioned patterns of the past, but from the present moment itself. There is no longer a need to control everything, because one trusts the natural flow of life. There is no longer a need to seek validation, because one is already complete. The mind, which once seemed like a relentless master, becomes a tool rather than a source of suffering. Thoughts still come, but they no longer dictate one's sense of self. Emotions still arise, but they are no longer mistaken for truth. When one realizes themselves as consciousness, they begin to see that thoughts are simply movements of energy, not something to be believed in blindly. They recognize that emotions are temporary waves, not defining realities. This shift brings a profound sense of inner stability, a grounded presence that is unshaken by the ups and downs of life. In this realization, a deep joy emerges, not the fleeting happiness that comes from external circumstances, but an abiding peace that exists independent of the outer world. This joy does not depend on success or failure, gain or loss, recognition or obscurity. It is the joy of simply being, the quiet contentment of resting in the truth of what one is. Even in the midst of challenges, this peace remains, because it is not based on anything that can be taken away. When one lives as consciousness, relationships transform. No longer does one seek to extract happiness from others, to use people as a means to fill an inner void. Instead, love flows naturally, without attachment, without fear. There is a deep presence in every interaction, a listening that is not just with the ears but with the heart. Love is no longer seen as something to get, but as something to give, because one is no longer lacking. To live in this way is to live in alignment with the deeper intelligence of life itself. Actions arise not from fear or desire, but from a place of wisdom and clarity. One no longer moves against the current of existence, but flows with it, trusting that life is unfolding as it should. This is the freedom that comes with self-realization. Not the freedom to do whatever the mind desires, but the freedom from the false self, the freedom from illusion. This realization is not reserved for a few. It is the birthright of all. It has always been here, waiting to be known. And the way to it is not through effort or striving, but through presence. Through the simple, direct recognition of what has always been. In this scene, life is no longer something to be conquered or figured out. It is something to be lived, fully, freely, and in harmony with the vast, silent awareness that is one's true nature. When one realizes themselves as consciousness, the restless search for meaning, happiness, and fulfillment comes to an end. No longer bound by the illusions of the mind, no longer trapped by fear or desire, one steps into the unshakable presence of being. This is not a future goal, not something to be attained through effort, but a truth that has always been here, waiting to be recognized. Life, once seen as a struggle, now flows with grace. There is no longer a need to seek peace, for peace is already here. There is no longer a need to chase after love, for love is one's very essence. The mind, once a master, becomes a servant, and the heart, once restless, settles into the deep stillness of presence. This is the great realization. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your past or your roles. You are the silent awareness in which all things come and go. And in that awareness there is nothing lacking, nothing to fear, nothing to seek. There is only the fullness of life itself, here and now, as it has always been. Be still and know the truth is already within you. It has never been elsewhere.